I am going to. I am going to start. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Come in.
Please do come.
Did you have a good time down in London?
Yes, brilliant time. The biggest struggle was the temptation to go out and about. You know, the museums, the life.
Fun.
Yeah, and have some fun. Especially when you finish. I would like, for example, a normal day would be 1 or 2 interviews in the morning, and then at about 1 p.m. I would be done for the day. So I could easily have fun around. But there are so many things to do, you know. At least the transcribing is such a pain in the foot. Transcription takes so much time.
Yeah.
So I didn't have that much time to enjoy.
Did you do it straight away, so it was all fresh in the mind?
I tried to, but then
takes a long time.
it takes a long time. Yeah, like hours on end. And when you have hours worth of audio recordings, that will take.
Yeah.
I think I will be busy for the next 2 or 3 weeks,
Yeah.
at least, just doing the transcriptions. Who has done transcriptions? Did you do it word for word, verbatim, or just the gist of it? Like, were you more liberal?
I produced a summary for the participants to check, and
Right.
some of those were translated back into their language, but then I've done a full transcription word for word for myself. But I wouldn't
see.
show them the full, because that would be awful for them to have to
So,
read that.
so the summary wasn't to save effort; it was because you thought it was more appropriate.
For them.
Yes, I
Yeah,
see.
Yeah.
Right. Who else done word for word?
Yeah, for Arabic.
I remember. Yeah. Yeah.
For Arabic, there is some of them talk a lot. Then
Yes.
it takes just only the summary, but give the meaning, because I can't manage the summary.
Yeah.
But in English, I transcribe it verbatim.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, word by word,
Yeah.
from Greek and this period then translate to English.
I see. I was reading something, an interview with someone, and the person that transcribed it did the transcription word for word and letter for letter and hum for hum. When you're reading it, it's really annoying because, for example, the person when they're speaking, they might start sentences but not finish them. So they will be, when we first started, it was like, when you are sometimes, let me put it this way, this was all written down.
Yeah.
It got really annoying, and I was just thinking this person took so much time out of their way, and the result that they shown is a little bit distracting. You know?
But actually there's information in those, because it actually says,
I see what you
I'm
mean.
struggling to think of an answer for this, so there is actually valid information within
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
context, because you can see behind it that there is a process happening.
If you use the discourse analysis, maybe this kind of wordings, these kind of things will be useful. But if you do thematic analysis, I'm not sure about
Yeah.
that.
I like your idea of actually transcribing it and then summarising it. I think that's quite useful.
And sometimes I clean up.
because of time
Yeah, I
limitation.
do clean up. Because it's
I need
to achieve, to reach. I use the last word when he
Yes,
makes the sentence.
that's what I was talking
Or
about.
some word is I found it is
Yeah.
I change it or grammar, but I can do. Yeah.
Now the thing is, you're absolutely right. You will lose some information when you are more liberal, but isn't it the case? Whatever you do, you are going to lose information because, for example, you're taking audio recording, not video. So there's a balance. You know, you're always going to give up something.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think it depends on what your purpose is, what you're looking for, perhaps.
Yeah.
You know, Like mine, part of them I sat and watched them do some writing, and my field notes, you can't hear it on the recording, but in my field notes I've put paused, and then I've said to them, oh, what are you thinking now? Because I want to know, and part of mine is what were the challenges, and so at the part where they pause and they're like, and I said, what is it? They've gone, I can't think of the academic vocabulary to use, or this sentence is troubling me, I'm not sure. So I kind of used the pauses in my field notes, made a note then, do you know what I mean? So then I think it would be appropriate for me to say they pause, but then you have to be consistent with it, don't you? Whichever one you go for, you can't say some of them I looked at pauses but others I didn't. I think that's the thing. Once you've made your bed, you have to lie in it.
Is there anyone use two methods, interview and observation together? No? Yeah, because I use these two together. Yeah, so in my case, I can use observation note for like this. This head teacher speaking when he is speaking, he hesitated to choose the word like this. Maybe even though I do not use kind of a deep discourse analysis in my interview analyzing, but I can include this kind of atmosphere in my observation note, I think.
And you will be like taking notes while they are speaking?
Observation note.
Yeah, observational notes.
No.
You will just know them later on?
I shadowed them from their start time to finishing time.
Right, you shadow, I see.
Yeah. So I think I felt do more and more, make more and more research observation note. I feel this was really useful to understand them.
Now let me ask you one thing. Why do you do observation? What is the data that you cannot get when you ask them the question that you get when you observe? Now observation as opposed to interviews, for example, instead of asking them, what did you do today? You are watching what they're doing and you are taking note. So I think the aim is get more representative data, more sincere answer.
Yes, actually my study is about their own perspectives. So I didn't try some kind of triangulation with database. Some maybe, for example, Sakina interviewed a head teacher and middle leader and just normal teachers. However, I cannot do this kind of way. If I interview other people, head teacher can feel a little bit uncomfortable. So, but I really need some kind of honest perspectives about their own motivation and their own performance. So I just take the data from them. But if I just use take data from them with the interview, I thought I need some kind of triangulation.
I see.
Yes.
Now,
so
I like the fact that you said you want more honest answer.
Yeah.
Because people are less honest when you are asking them head on. I agree to that. But my next question is, when you are observing them, don't you think they might change their behavior?
When I observe them, first I tried to do my best, give them some kind of safety feeling to participate my research. So the gatekeeper's role was very important. I was introduced by a very sincere person with them, so they opened their mind to me. Yeah, first this was important, and the second, when I went to them, they don't have any reason to pretend something to me. Yeah, there was no reason.
There's no reason for them to change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before I meet them, I introduced my research. So when I introduced my research before I meet them, they have some kind of understanding about my research. Oh, this is not a research for the evaluation.
Okay.
This is the research about the understanding, and this will be not for me and for the other head teachers, next to the head teachers, or the head teacher, aspiring head teachers in the other country. So
they don't feel threatened. Is that the reason?
yeah,
Okay.
never. And they willingly wanted to show their real thinking. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was.
Well,
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm writing about this part. What is my research? What is the perspectives research, and how I draw on their honest feeling and their motivation and their real. If they have some kind of complaint, they can just tell me, "Oh, I don't like this," or "Oh, I have a confidence about this." Because
and did they say that? Did anyone say that?
yeah,
They did.
Of course, because they don't have any reason they have to stop their.
I see what you mean.
Their mouth.
Yeah. So she's the only one who's doing observation, right? That's interesting.
I think I do a little bit of observation.
Yeah.
I did some observation, but that is on online observation and online interviews, so I don't know how that fits into the conversation. It's a bit different, because I don't have the dynamics of seeing the ums, ahs. So
Right.
it introduced a bit of restriction, if I can say that. But
See what you mean.
yeah.
Interesting.
I quite like the idea of, because it's not occurred to me before, that actually after an interview you could maybe write a couple of paragraphs just to say your impressions of how you feel that interview has gone, because actually straight after an interview you will have some impressions that may be different to what comes out on the transcription.
I'm doing that, but I am not calling my research observation because that is not going into the data. That's just for me,
But it's not something that I've considered doing. I'm just saying it's prompted, what you've said has prompted me to think, actually when I finished an interview, just jotting down a paragraph of my perception would add information. Not that it's going to be used for analysis or anything, but it would just add information and context to the transcript afterwards.
Context, I think, is the key word here.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's good practice because it's a reflexive memo.
Sorry?
It's a good practice for as a reflexive memo.
Is that what you?
Yeah.
Do you do that when you're interviewing people?
I keep a research diary, and I have like memos in it that I categorise. So if it's something that's an opinion, and
you will,
I'll note as I'll just call it SRM, so I know it's self-reflexive memo, so I know it's not actual data or anything like that, and it's just so then I can see it and I know that it applies to that. And then if it's a memo about methodology, I'll just call it MM, methodological memo, because sometimes you pick up something and it clearly is about methodology and you think so I just keep.
That's nice. I like the tagging because
it
saves time.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully when I get to finishing my methodology section, I'll have aggregated all the memos within that. So because you have thoughts at different times and you're not always sort of in a place to actually go to your methodology section and write it in. It's just a good aggregator of your thoughts as you do your research. Yeah. Sorry I'm late, by the way. I was caught up with Andrew sorting out some admin stuff.
Good. Now today we are going to be joined by Michael at 11:30. He said. Now the things on the agenda, we are going to ask him a little bit about research paradigm, the question that is always coming up in each of our meetings, and hopefully he will set the record straight about that. Interviews, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We are going to share examples about interviews, what went wrong and how did we deal with that, the use of Likert scale. Also, there are the two questions that Michelle put on the Facebook page. The first one, I don't know if you read my comment. I thought it was really important question and something we are going to be struggling with whenever we are writing either a thesis or whatever. The question was how to deal with different inner. What was the term?
Different styles.
Author, different writing styles. Yeah,
For
different inner
areas.
styles. Yeah.
Theory
And-
and practical. Sometimes it's very easy because your theory, all your
Yeah.
reading is theory, and then the writing is easy.
And I don't think she meant like when you start your writing up, and then 2 years after that you're finishing, you will be changed. That's of course a one way to. But there is another way. When you are even when you're writing at the same time, when you're writing about something that you encountered in an interview, it's different than when you're writing about something you read in a book.
Yeah.
So I think that's what she meant. So even if you started rewriting the whole thesis at the end of your PhD, you might still be faced with different inner writing styles. So when you're writing about personal stuff, it's different when you're writing about facts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I found it interesting to read about how people co-author books, because when you have two authors of a book, you have people with two very different writing styles. Maybe not necessarily, but sometimes it happens. But then you have this one whole unit. The book will be very cohesive. And I thought it was interesting to look online how people do that. And I did post a link, and the answer came from Cora, by the way. I remembered you when I found that. And the key was for them is for them it was communication, but that won't help us. But the other thing was getting a second opinion about what you wrote. So give your writing to other people and tell them to comment on that and read it and say whether or not it is easy to understand and easy flowing. So I thought this might be something that would be a good use of this supporter group. We could share our writings and get each other's opinions about that.
That would be good.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to add to the agenda? So I could ask Michael. Case studies. What about them?
There is, debate whether case studies you could do review or paradigm or whatever.
Yes.
This one question.
I see.
Another one is, I found different authors give different categories for case study, or different type, mention different type of case study.
Yeah.
Make it what is in his opinion the type of case study.
Right. I remember that one. Yeah. Maybe again, Michael can help us set the record
I had a
straight.
question about case studies. I'm finding when I'm writing about my case study, my methodology, I'm writing the context is absolutely essential. So I'm looking at different perspectives of the context from like an international level or a national level, and then kind of zooming down onto context around the cases themselves. But what I'm finding is when I'm talking about international, national, and then regional, I'm finding I'm repeating what I've written in my literature review. Because the literature review and my rationale for doing the study is about
it's
context.
the same thing, yeah.
Yeah. So I could maybe ask Mick about that.
I see.
I read a very interesting reading, very short, about the case study. Have you heard about the marshmallow examination? Marshmallow thing. The children receive the marshmallow, and the instruction would be just 30 minutes or 20 minutes later you can eat. Someone patient it, but someone cannot patient it. After that, maybe 6 years later, their SAT exam result was different. So the researcher talk about the patient can give some influence about their academic achievement. It was the research, but just one Japanese professor when he talk about case study, he used this example. This was a kind of study. But this marshmallow study is not a case study, because they just use the percentage. How many children eat marshmallow in time, out of time, like this. And then they just show sometimes later they have got
how
a good
they
achievement or not. But there was no story. How they have, this kind of students have what kind of habit or this is the influence this and this comes to this. Like this, there is no this kind of study. So initial marshmallow study is a kind of quantitative study rather than qualitative study.
Right.
But in case study, the researcher should write a story about why this story flows this way. This was he explained about the case study in this term, so it was very interesting reading.
Now I know the marshmallow study, from what I understood, is that the children were given two options: either eat the marshmallow immediately, and the game would be one marshmallow, or wait for some while and get an extra marshmallow. So there was a choice of immediate small gain or delayed bigger gain. So actually it comes down to being more rational. Do you accept 100 pounds right now, or do you wait for tomorrow and take 200 pounds? Rationality dictates that we should maximize our gain, so we should wait, right? So when we put it like that, it is very easy to see why those people who were more rational did better on their studies. Of course, there's no causation, but there is definite correlation. So
they use this as a sociological argument for differences in achievement in education in terms of social class differences.
Right.
And they say that there's a difference in the socialisation of children from working class backgrounds to middle class backgrounds, which they called immediate gratification and delayed gratification. And they say that the working class kids have this immediate gratification, and therefore they're not really buying into the longevity of the school education achievement process. And that's a sociological view on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I believe that, but yeah. It's interesting.
So do you think there is no different between people from different backgrounds when it comes to
education achievement?
Yeah,
Oh,
education
definitely.
achievement.
I think there is, but I think it's more complex than just
I see.
gratification.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
So maybe we should start teaching delayed gratification at school.
Yeah, well, I think sociology should be compulsory. Yeah.
It's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about interviews. Almost all of you done interviews. Do they always go according to plan, or did you have some trouble with some interviews? And was that toward the beginning, middle, or end? I will start. I've done a couple of interviews, and I've done interview research before. And at the beginning, I thought first couple of interviews were not going perfectly, and I thought, well, I will get the hang of it later on, and it will become easier. But that doesn't happen. For me, any interview could go wrong at any time. And I think the number one reason for that is when the respondent is not committed to the interview. Sometimes you can feel that the respondent you're talking to aren't really there, or very busy, or something else. Like one person I interviewed, she was getting fired later on at the end of that academic year, and she wasn't really bothered about giving me information about her job. So, do you want to share what makes interviews go wrong for you, or are they absolutely perfect? Someone?
I think the questions that you ask is key, and I think that for me that's something that I struggle with. How do you actually write a really good question that actually elicits the information that you're looking for? Because I find sometimes the questions that get the best answers are also the ones that get the worst answers.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I would say, can you give me an example of a lesson that you felt really pleased with? And sometimes a question like that elicits the most wonderful response, and other times it kind of like things come out and you think, oh my word, that's going on in your lesson, that's terrible, you know, or they just shrivel up and they can't think of anything. So I guess for me, I think that the questions that you ask are key, and I'm mystified by sometimes the same question can get the best answer and also the worst answer.
I see what you mean.
Yes.
Now, I want to add something. When I ask a question, I try to make it as general as possible and give as little hints and pointers towards what I think is the right answer, whether that thing exists or not. And when I'm doing that, I get very varying kinds of answers. When I try to focus the question more, then my question is really leading, and this is something my supervisor had picked up upon. He said, "This is a very leading question. You shouldn't be asking this one." But for me, a leading question is the best question. A leading question is the best question to get the answer that you really want. Like, for example, the best answer is a yes or no answer, right? Because that is like white and black and white. But to get a yes and no answer, you have to ask question head on, and in qualitative data, you want to try and reduce that, limit that as possible, as much as possible. So yeah, I don't know what to do about that. Someone has experience with dealing with leading questions?
I did.
Yeah?
And there was a big kind of linguistic problem that I had because my work was in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And in Vietnamese, when you're asking a question, unlike here, we often put is that right? Right? The intonation goes up at the end. So would you agree with that? And in Vietnamese, they don't. It just is completely flat at the end. So at the end, it's like a yes or no at the end of the sentence. And they say, do you think it hump? Just like yes or no. And so when I was asking the questions,
so do you say yes or no at the end, like the French?
Yes.
I say.
Yeah, and the languages.
That was like this.
French,
no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes or no. But it's just like at the end, it's just completely flat, no intonation up. And so even those people who I worked with who had quite good English proficiency, the way I was finishing my sentences was confusing them. They were like, "Is that a question or isn't it?" You know. So that was quite difficult. And then they were like, and I had to say it again and reformulate it as if say, "I am asking you a question now," you know. And then also my other habit of, you sat your entrance exam when you were 17, yeah? And because I know the system, the education system, but again, it was very leading in that way. And I was like, I'm sorry, did you? Or how old were you when you? And things like that were creeping in. The more I got to know, as I worked with 10 case study students, the more I thought I knew, and I was like, okay, this part is standardised, and actually, I should have done that. So I could hear myself sometimes, and I had to go back and go, I'm sorry, let me ask that question again. Yeah. But it was interesting, the intonation in the language, you know. Yeah.
That will make those of us who are doing research in an environment where you have people coming from different backgrounds and different cultures really hard, because in Vietnam you know the language.
A little bit.
But for me, I'm doing research here in England now. Granted, people here speak English, but people here come from different backgrounds. It's a truly multicultural environment. So that will make it really hard for me to pick up on those language.
Yesterday I talked with this Scottish guy, and I can't understand. I couldn't understand him. So, pardon, could you tell me again? And it was really hard. Yeah.
Was it because of his pronunciation?
Yeah. I think he came from Scottish. He has some kind of Scottish.
The accent.
Pronunciation.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello. That's difficult.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you for organising it. It's wonderful.
Well,
Just hope I don't have to do anything.
we were just talking about interviews and when they.
Sorry, I'm a bit late.
No, it's all right. And when they go wrong, and what might be the reasons and what might be the solutions for that. I said for me, the number one reason why interviews might go wrong is when the respondents aren't very committed to the interview. Michelle said from her experience, because she's done research interviews in Vietnam, so different cultural context. It was different linguistics, and different use of language. So even though people that she was interviewing spoke English, but there were slight and subtle differences in how they perceive English. Anyone else did face trouble when doing interviews, like a theme that was emerging?
It is about found difficulties when I interview my participant in their office.
Okay.
And they are pick up the phone
and distracted.
Some employees is coming to his office because I interview head of department and vice president.
Yes.
Yeah. Was really difficult, and the interview takes ages to finish. Every time interrupted it, switch off the recorder and play it again, and it was so horrible.
Yeah.
And I asked the quality leadership department to allocate meeting room, so we'll be away from their offices and away from their employees and away from the secretary, from phones, everything. And I sorted out, but at the beginning I really struggled interviewing these people in their offices.
Noise was another one that was difficult for me because it wasn't my area, it wasn't my university. I couldn't, like here I felt, if I was doing interviews here, I feel like I know who I could talk to say, please can you find me a quiet, nice room somewhere. Whereas there I had nobody. It was like you were using this space, you know. And I was just so grateful that I was allowed to do my research there. But there was building work going on, and it was just unbelievable. And I was so, in a time period, I had so little time to get the interviews done. It was like, if I cancel this now and postpone it, I know it's going to put me back a week. So it was like just trying my very best to, you know, put stuff around the doors so I couldn't hear the drilling, but sometimes it was really difficult. When I listen back, I think, how on earth I managed the determination just to get the interview done, but it's not ideal.
Yeah. I had one interview, it was a very peculiar case. It was with the dean of a faculty, and he was a very busy man. But what was very interesting is that I asked him a particular question about a recent quality initiative, and he actually didn't have the answer, although he knew I was going to ask him about it. So he called into his office his chief operating officer. I wasn't very interested in interviewing that person, although I was interested in getting the answer, but I also wanted to know what the dean thought about the initiative, because I could find that information online. So the answer wasn't the information itself, but what he knew about it and how he perceived it. So when he called that person into the office, I could just say, oh, thank you for calling him in, and I couldn't say, no, I don't want the answer. But then I had to, as politely as possible, get that person out of the room so I can get back onto my interview. Do you know what I mean?
I also have a similar experience. I went to the head teacher, but head teacher want to make me interview with some head of a department.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to show his capability through him. So, but actually, this study is not about the capability things. But okay, I just followed his instruction because it can be another kind of his way of doing.
Yeah, it gives you information about him as well. It still gives you information.
Yeah,
but how did you go about it? Did you just stick with the other person?
No. It's not a whole interview, but in the process of my shadowing.
I see what you mean.
In my shadowing, he tried to he was doing authorized his official document,
yes.
And then he made me talk with the other head about his project. So,
yes.
Okay, and I heard lots of stories. Oh yeah, it's great. Oh great. And
Yeah.
And when I write my observation note, maybe I can write down the other aspect. Yeah, maybe head teacher wanted to show his progress through other head. Maybe I can write down
Right.
this kind of things.
Yeah. Right.
Can I ask a question? How do people introduce the interview? Because I think in my ethics, I had a form that they had to sign to say that they were, happy for me to transcribe their information, and
Yes.
at any point, if they asked a question, they didn't have to answer it. All those kinds of things. And you set up the title, and you said, actually, this
I
is
see.
what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
Is that
the
what everybody
formalities.
else has done with interviews? Is that fairly?
Yeah, I
Well,
did.
for me,
Yeah.
I did that. Yeah.
Yeah. It
Because
was
that-
actually useful.
Because that then sets the
Yeah.
boundaries a bit
Well,
more, I think.
they would need two sets of information. They would need to know about the research and the researcher and what are you interested in,
Yes.
and they would
So do you
need
send that in advance?
I did.
Yes.
I did.
and they
Okay.
need to have a consent form. You need
Yeah.
you need to have their consent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Within that, you would slip information about how data is going to be used, whether it's anonymized or not,
Yeah.
whether they can withdraw from the research at a later time or not, stuff like that. And you would need that to be signed, right? I
Yeah.
think it's
I'm just thinking
ethically and
that
morally.
that
just-
sets the context.
Yes, and you have to send it
quite
beforehand.
clearly. Yeah.
Now, you will notice people respond very differently.
Yeah.
Some people said, send me the questions in advance, or some people said, tell me what you're going to be
Yeah.
asking me about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, there is no problem with that, except if you have been doing research for a while and you hadn't been sending questions in,
Yeah.
maybe that will mess up your data. If different
Yeah.
people are treated differently,
Yeah.
because now
And
they are.
that's difficult if you're doing
Yes,
it over a
that
long
might be
period of
difficult.
time.
Yeah, or it might not, according to what you're doing.
Actually, I have two cases. One case I sent every introduction and everything they asked, and in that case, their quality of their answer was very good. But if I missed that process, they just spent their interview time quickly. They wanted to just spend the interview time quickly because they don't have any more motivation to join my interview. So yeah, there was
Mhm.
one or two cases I missed the introduction process. So I can when I can compare with these two cases, yeah, maybe depends on the research features of character of research. Maybe you shouldn't do like that kind of thing. But in my case, yeah, the introduction was really useful. Yeah, get some good quality answers.
So in that introduction, do people say, we expect this interview to last about this length of time, and these are some of the things that I'm hoping we'll be able to explore together? Do you kind of ask those questions at the start? I don't know.
Oh, you mean to sort of establish the kind of the conversational aspect?
Yeah, so say
And-
to start with maybe, for the next 20 minutes, I hope we'll be able to talk about these sorts of things. Are you comfortable with doing that? Or, just setting the context so you've both got an agreed understanding of what you're hoping to do.
I do that.
Yeah. Is that...
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. That's a good introduction.
Yeah.
It depends, I think, on the person. So
It depends on the person.
sometimes they might already have an idea. It depends how formal and informal it is, I think, because I've had an interview where I sent a few questions in advance because they requested it, and then they had a really clear idea about what they wanted to discuss, so they were just ready to get going as soon as I switched on, and didn't get really a chance to do like the introduction and everything, but that was
Yeah.
okay because it kind of it got the ball rolling and there was rapport ready and they really wanted to talk, and so sometimes you've got to adapt as well. If you can establish the sort of themes that you're going to explore and just get that going, then I think that's a good idea.
Right. Anything else about interviews? Shall we move on? Now, we were going to talk about research paradigm, interviews, the use of Likert scale, and writing styles, and finally a question about case studies. Now we talked about interviews. Now, very quickly, research paradigm is something that had came up in every one of these meetings, and people are really worried, not worried, interested about that. Now, let me start by pointing this question towards you, Michael. Do you think a research paradigm is something that we have to come up with beforehand or after we have done our research? By research paradigm, I am referring to ontology and epistemological point of view.
That was
Because when we start our research, we read, and when some of us were writing our methodology chapter,
From US.
this is from the US.
From Trader Joe's from America.
oh, fantastic.
Thank you.
You wanted me to say a few words?
Well, if you now the question is, when I was writing my methodology chapter at the beginning of the PhD, I came up with I tried to explore my paradigm and what my ontology was, but I suspect this is something that will change or not change, but it is something that I am going to. It will become more clear for me when I am nearing the end of my PhD. Actually, I will take it a further from that. I think we start to shape and understand our paradigm after we have done at least one major research. So ideally, I would have an answer about what my epistemology is after I finish my PhD. So when do you think is a good time for us to sit down and think about that and write about it?
Could I throw it open first before I...
Please.
Could I ask what other people think first? So, then I can respond to what
Yeah, I'm
people
sorry.
are saying.
The reason for me asking you,
You
I'm sorry
talked
about
about
that
it all
because we
before.
talked about it. Yeah, but you have to hear what
Okay.
other people have to say about it.
This is a very simple, maybe silly question. In Greek word, epistemology means science, she said.
Yeah.
But why we still use word epistemology rather than just science? I heard epistemological level of question. I heard this
Yeah.
word. Maybe we can just say scientific level of question. We can say like this. We can just simply translate like this. But
This is exactly the same, epistemologikos in Greek.
Yeah.
But does it mean exactly the same thing in English? I think this is the matter with terms because they come very
Yeah,
much
so
loaded.
I just thinking about this. Why people still use epistemology? Why they don't use just the scientific or science?
Because the
like
Greek
this?
words are the best. Democracy. The Greek word. You like that one?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think you wouldn't be
Greeks.
you wouldn't be surprised for me to say what I've always said about this stuff, that I think that there's a disconnect between the way people write about epistemology and ontology in research methods books and in thesis and what they actually do.
Mhm.
And I think from that point of view, introducing epistemology, ontology can confuse as much as it helps. You know, I think that people can not waste, well that's the wrong word, but can go down and spend a lot of time worrying about these questions and not really get very far. So I guess my sort of sense would be to start thinking about doing the project, framing the questions, and then sort of thinking about these things again, at least afterwards, and not really, because I think one of the problems is people, you know, naturally, and I'm the worst phrase, are saying, well, you must label things, you must say what kind of study you're doing, and you must be able to find a word to describe it. And I think that's true, and I think finding a label is a really good challenge. So that one of the things, are you talking about case study today?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because that's a case in point, is about, you know, this label case study. Although it's kind of trivial whether you're going to use the word or not, thinking about why you want to use the word or why you don't want to use the word is not trivial. It's an important point, I think. And I think with epistemology and ontology, it's the same thing, that they have, I think thinking about it is really good, but it's hard to reach some kind of agreement. And I think where it helps most is thinking about research questions, because I just think that your ontological ideas are subsumed into this, bundled up into the questions you ask. So, and that for me is always the interesting thing, is when people say, oh, I'm an interpretivist. Oh, I've said this before, I'm an interpretivist, I don't believe in truth. And then their research questions say, I want to know why this happens. And it's like, it doesn't add up. And those kind of things are interesting to debate, and that's where I think the discussion on ontology and epistemology is interesting. But I think, after getting the basics and understanding the basics of the cases, I think it's a question then of going back to your data, going back to your research questions, and then looking at your analysis, and then working back up and saying, oh yes, I can see now that I've got a sort of quite an interpretivist point of view, because I'm asking a lot of questions which are asking for people's feelings, people's perceptions, and that's what I'm doing. So it can get very complicated, and I think one way of simplifying things also, by the way, is I know Crotty in his book, whatever it was called, does say, well, you don't bother talking about ontology, just talk about epistemology, because there's not much you can say about ontology that isn't being said by epistemology. And I don't know if that's true, but if you wanted some support, you can, I've always got in a terrible muddle about, okay, I can understand this sort of hierarchy, which goes something like objectivism as an ontology, positivism, see, I can't even do it now, I don't know. But, positivism as epistemology, is that right? Yeah. And then experimental methods going there, and that's all, I think that bit's quite clear, actually. I think if you believe the world is full of objective facts, I think you can build quite a nice pyramid showing how it all works. I think when you come to interpretivism, I think that's where it gets complicated. I think you have social constructivism as a sort of epistemology, but that's complicated because everybody in education knows social constructivism from Vygotsky and from learning strategies, and they're not the same thing, I don't think. Then if that's social constructivism and epistemology, what is the ontology that goes with it? And I think that's quite complicated. So I think it's, I'm not going to say anything that you probably haven't all discussed, but for me it's a complicated business, and I would get the ideas first, the important point for me is always think about how the research questions reflect overarching ideas about the world, and I think it's the research questions that do that. And try and think about consistency. If you try and be consistent with the questions you ask, and with your overarching view of the world. And I think you'll get quite a long way on that, really. I think that and I mean, from the practical point of view, I've never seen theses be torn apart over epistemology and chapters on epistemology and ontology. I mean, some people go into it in great depth, and some people barely touch on it. It's not something to be excessively worried about. I would think the big thing to be worried about is the consistency angle, and say, look, what consistent story can I tell about my research in terms of my understanding of the way we get knowledge, my understanding of the way the world is.
Can I make a suggestion? We said about perhaps in this group we could read each other's work as a second point of view, as somebody to say, would you mind having a look? Maybe if some people were okay with it, I would be to bring along maybe our research questions and those of us who have written our epistemology and ontology section, and say, here are my research questions and here is my thing. What do you think about how well they match?
How they match.
That's a very small, focused
Yeah.
piece of reading. That could be, you know, we're not going to be reading 20,000 words unless your section is 20,000 words on epistemology, but it's just really focused. It's a suggestion, whatever you think.
So you could do maybe one a session. Take it in turns.
Or we can use our blog, because different people have a different process of writing. So when I write about epistemology, in my epistemology, I can put to the blog and others can read it.
That might be a suggestion. We could post them online and say, if you've got time, you don't mind doing it, you know,
Yeah.
would you read
Yeah.
most comments? I'd be
Yeah.
happy to upload mine,
Yeah.
and I'd be happy to read someone else's.
Yeah.
What's kind of quite interesting for me is that I can't, I was thinking, oh yeah, and that I can recommend some thesis that I've supervised or somebody else has supervised, which really cracks it, and I can't find it. And I think one of the biggest problems I'm sorry to go on about it, but it's just my point is always the same one, is that we have this interpretivism, positivism set up as dimensions. Nobody, I keep saying to my friend Jerry always says, who is a positivist? Where are you going to find these positivists? And were there ever positivists? What is another interesting thing. And who are really interpretivists? Who are really properly interpretivists? And what does it, what would that mean? Nearly all of us are in the middle there. And I suppose some of the interesting things are ways in which people try to describe the middle. And for me, one of the students, Rosanna, she was trying to present it as pragmatic, and so she was a pragmatist, which kind of, that was in the papers also, in the working papers in progress thing.
Okay.
She wrote about it, and that was interesting. But I think nobody's really found the word to describe what we really are. So I think you should get in there and define it for the world and be the first to do it.
I think it's the biggest challenge for us is when we different authors have different terminology.
Yeah.
Regarding, in methodology in general, but specifically in paradigms. For example, some of them say interpretivist and positivist is position, and some of them call it paradigm.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not so sure which is the right one. Is it a part of the terminology, and
So
positions
or paradigm? I don't know. What does anybody else think about paradigms?
I think you need to work backwards, like you said, from research questions. I think you can feel some security in having it all figured out, but actually, I think it's more constructive to actually think about it continuously, simultaneously, as you sort of navigate your way through your research, and then reflect back and think, what's the most coherent story I can tell about how I've constructed my research. And I think the paradigm is, for me, it's emergent. Yeah. And so it's something that you reflect on. And I also think that I haven't really read anywhere about why knowing what the paradigm is and why understanding the minutiae of the paradigm, how that actually helps. So I'm trying to find I know sort of why you'll think about it, and I understand about ontology and epistemology, but I think that it's I think that
There is an article.
Do you mean it might be distracting? If you overthink about it, do you mean it might get in the
at the
way?
beginning of research, I think.
I see what you mean.
If you think about it too much.
Yeah, if you overthink about, I think I'm guilty of that. Yeah, and it cost some time.
Yeah, because I had a few sort of weeks where I was reading lots and lots of books about post-positivism and all these different areas, and I still wasn't really sure about what it was that I was getting from it in terms of how it was going to help me move on. But I think it was good to actually go through that and create that perspective then on in terms of what I should be thinking about and what to be really concerned with and what I can just sort of pick up as I go along.
Sometimes, yeah.
No, I think your thinking does develop as you go along, because I remember when I wrote my essay for this assignment, I thought I was a post-positivist, and my title was an investigation into, but as time's gone on and I've realised actually what I'm doing is more action research. So instead of it being an investigation, I'm now doing an inquiry, which is slightly different, and I would say it sits more naturally within a pragmatic paradigm. So that means that actually what I'm doing, if you sit it in that context, you say, well then, what I actually then need to do needs to sort of reflect that kind of worldview. So then actually my intervention that I'm doing in school is sort of reflected in the way I'm approaching my research. So I'm doing action research, which is an inquiry into. So then my intervention is going to be an inquiry into. So I'm almost sort of doing with them what I'm trying to do myself, which then goes back to my question. Does that make sense? But I think that I am sure I will probably change as I go along as well. And I think that that's one thing you can do if you've got a pragmatic approach, that actually you're allowed to evaluate. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, Michael, but I think that you actually, the best fit, what fits best as you're going along, and it might change. And I think that's quite liberating, because actually you only know what you know at this point in time. You don't know what you don't know. But as you go on, you will find out more, and actually you'll think, oh, actually, that doesn't fit quite right here. Maybe I need to change this or adapt that.
But I think that works for you because you can give a name to something, because you're saying the paradigm is within a pragmatic paradigm. And there's a problem with pragmatic, as you know, because you can have a big P or a small p, pragmatic. But if you take it with a big P, pragmatic as a sort of philosophy, you can say that, you know, that actually works for you very well, because pragmatists think it's only through action that you can understand the world. And that gives it a coherence, what you're doing, and you can give a name to it and a coherence to it, which really works, I think.
And actually, this kind of reading about the paradigm provide me helping my research way of thinking how to make my research. Anyway, give me chance. When I didn't know about the realistic.
Critical realism, is it?
No, realistic evaluation. Yeah, when I didn't know about this, I just made my research. After then, I heard about that concept. While I'm reading the concept, I can check my way of examine my research, kind of thing. So it was, and it made me like she said, reflective things, and I can confirm my way. Oh, my way of thinking was kind of epistemological one. However, I can develop this way, like that. I can check with this kind of concept. And when I heard about narrative inquiry, I didn't read about this. But it seems like if I knew about this concept, I may develop my research method a little bit precisely, I guess. So maybe, reading about the
having
paradigm,
like a general overview.
Yeah,
of
paradigm
each
can
one.
gives me some chance to extend my making research method or making way of thinking. I suppose.
There's a really good book that gives you 5 different paradigms. I think Strauss and Corbin. And they just go through 5 different paradigms and how they've been applied in research. So at the back there's a few extracts of papers, and they say this is where this paper has shown they use this and this and this. So it kind of compares them.
Interesting.
Sorry, who is the author?
It's Strauss and Corbin, I'm pretty
Okay.
sure. Research methods and paradigms.
We will look it up. hopefully put it for others to see. Now, when I was reading about paradigms, and the one problem I faced, it's quite funny actually. When you read about one school of thought or the other, you get convinced with it because it's very well established. We're not talking about something new. We're talking about something that really smart people have thought about for quite a long time. So when I read about relativism, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense and it resonates with me. And then when you read about critical theory, oh, that makes perfect sense. That resonates. And the thing is, I could resonate with many different schools of thought. So that is why I think the best practice is not a thought experiment, but it is a practical experiment. So don't think about but see how you do research, and then write about that. So write about your own experience. So when we think about it and when we want to intellectualize it, we are trying to find the quote unquote most the one that makes most sense. But in reality, humans don't really make sense. So see how you do research and then write about how you've done research.
Yeah.
I think that vocabulary question you raised was important because you're talking about paradigms and we're suddenly comfortable talking about paradigms.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that you get a lot from using the word paradigm as opposed to sort of stance or position. I quite like that actually. What do you prefer?
I like worldview.
Worldview, okay. Okay.
You're a
And-
global citizen, aren't you?
And I think the problem with, paradigm's okay. It's just that it did have that particular. It was kind of borrowed from natural science, from this idea of okay, here we have. It was irresistible that we have paradigms in natural science, and so we can borrow that because that's a nice way to describe what they do. But I don't think we really do the same thing as natural science do. So I'm a bit sort of. What I'd all say is you don't have to go down the route of using the word paradigm. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying that it's not necessarily the best. It can open up. The expression is a can of worms, isn't it? I don't know why we use that.
Now, on the topic of using different terminology and the vocabulary that you mentioned, I want to move to talking about case study, because case study is also something that you find people writing about using different terminology, and actually you can find people arguing it's a research method or methodology or design. So this is something we talked about earlier, and if we can go quickly around the room, someone has to say something about that. What do you think a study is?
It depends on what you're researching.
Okay, so for you?
So it could be, if you're doing a case study, it's not necessarily one location or one instance. It could be that you're looking at one concept across many different cases.
I see.
So
Okay.
you're using case study because you're going to have like a consistent protocol for research, and so you can show some sort of consistency in how you're carrying out your research. But I think whether it's a method or a methodology really depends on what you're doing and how you've thought about it and your own rationale for how you're carrying out your research.
Okay.
So at the moment, I'm not entirely sure whether it's going to be methodology or method, but I'm still sort of trying to iron out. I'm trying to look at what I'm doing and how I'd explain it, and then I'll sort of formulate where I'd actually position case study within my research.
For me, I think I argued it for a methodology or a methodological design, but the methods then would be the things I did working with each of the participants, so interviews, observations, compose and allow. In my mind, they were my methods, but it was the methodology was a case study, multiple case study design. Yeah.
Who were the cases?
In the end,
what was the case? I should
yes,
say?
In the end, and I had to rewrite this section. I went for each of my 10 participants were to be taken as a case in their own right, with a focus on their experience of writing in English. At first I thought maybe it's the universities where they come from, which is the case. The case is the university because that was based on the subject, but it didn't work out, and it wouldn't have been enough what I was doing within each of the university to be considered a full case study. So in the end, the participants became a case in their own right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But are they cases or case studies in their own right? That's the question I'd ask you.
I would say that each of them was a case.
How good is that? Yeah.
They were a case, and it was a multiple case study design. But each person was a case in their own right, yeah, within their context. I've got yins like multiple case study design in my mind, yeah. But it took a while to figure out who or what, or actually is the focus, the subject itself, the case? Is writing in English the case at hand? And there's different ways you could look at it, but that seemed to fit better than others, really. Anybody else?
Well, when I first started using case study, I thought case study was a methodology of research, right? And I thought I had it figured out. There's my research paradigm, ontological point of view, epistemological point of view, and then methodology, right? So each one dictates the other one, and the methodology was case study. And then when I read about it, I found some people even referring to case study as a research design, and I found these Elliott and Lucas. They say case study is a research genre. So so it is like your epistemological point of view would be whether you regard case study as being a fit research tool or not. So there's very varying stance. So again, it goes back to your worldview and how you regard it. I think, well, for me now, it doesn't really matter what you categorize case study is, as long as you can argue and defend your standpoint. So take one argument and stick with it. This is what I think right now. Right.
I think one of the problems, I agree with you, but I was rereading the notes that we had on the website actually, and I kind of wanted to check those out, and I think, yeah, that actually does, it does kind of, I do agree with what we put out there. And I think the only sort of, I think it just I think it goes back to your earlier question. People reach for case study. In answer to the earlier one, they don't have a way, we don't have a word to describe what we do, and we're always scrambling for words to fill the gap. So case study seems to fill the gap. I guess the link with case study with epistemology is the idea that the case is worth studying. So that if you're a believer in positivism or what have you, then if you're believing in large scale, you won't get the idea of the small scale. And so case study does carry that sense of, I believe in looking at people's understanding the world from the viewpoint of the individual. So that's why it's got that interpretivist connotation. And it's a kind of like, as I say somewhere else, ethnography light view of case study. And I think we can get round a lot of the questions, a lot of the problems of it by talking about cases rather than case study, and just say, look, these are cases of something. Yeah. And I wonder whether other disciplines get bogged down in case study in the way that education does. I'm not sure. You people with the DTC will be able to tell me that perhaps, but I think I think a lot of in politics, I think they just treat them as cases. These are cases. You can have large end studies, lots of cases, or small end studies, small cases, and they don't seem to get too het up about it. They're just cases, and I think perhaps maybe that's what we should do, and just say, oh, these are cases, and that's what we do. But overall. And I think we've got this sense case study is small case study, and politics talks about large cases, as I say, from a different tradition. So it's a very difficult. It's not surprising that so many people are associating so many different words with case study, so many different ideas, and we can just do what we can do. I think one of the things we can do goes back to this looking at how it's always satisfying to find in the literature someone who's done something in method or methodology or whatever very similar to what we've done. And I think that's a good way of looking at it, because you can never be criticised for saying it's a case study if you're able to quote that X and Y did something very similar and they called it a case study. Do you see what I mean? That's one way of looking at it, perhaps, that might be helpful. Yeah, but overall, not to get bogged down in it, I think.
Right. Anyone else wants to add anything about case studies or research?
Could I ask that question about writing? About
Is it about the writing styles?
No, it was about specifically in relation to case studies.
I'm sorry,
I'm in the methodology chapter, when I'm writing about case study and the importance of context, and I'm trying to I'm writing about the individual's context, I find that I'm repeating what I've said in the literature review. This was for you, Mick.
Okay.
Because part of their context, like each participant is a case in their own right, and I'm interested in looking at different perspectives of their context or different levels, so international, national, regional, geographical, socio-economic, all that rich context stuff, as well as, which primary school they went to. But when I'm talking about the wider stuff, the bigger picture, I've found that I've said a lot of that in the literature review, because I'm talking about them being English language learners in terms of English as an international language, in terms of within Southeast Asia, what's been going on. So I'm finding it's quite repetitive. Any advice?
No, only the one that you've thought of yourself, I suspect, which is to mix and match in some way. I mean, I mean, obviously, whatever you do, you don't want to repeat the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's for sure. Well, I wouldn't imagine it's an insurmountable difficulty. I should think the macro stuff is the context in the beginning, and then you just refer to that without going into detail in describing the people. And then you bring it all together in the discussion at the end. But you knew that, so there must be something that's stopping you from doing that.
My issue is, my big thing in my mind is, don't refer back in academic writing. Don't keep saying, going back to this as you can,
Oh, I don't think that's a problem at all.
Okay.
I think it's a good thing, because it shows you're doing your thesis, and it shows
the
threads through it.
Yeah, okay.
And and the people won't look back, I can tell you that. They're reading it, so you can say anything. You can say, as I discussed in chapter 1, even if you didn't discuss it, they'll read you.
But I suppose
what are you saying?
The things that I will be saying will be a development of what was said before. It will be a development from the very personalised kind of, okay.
No, but I think, seriously, I think you can refer back, and I think it's a good thing to refer back.
Okay.
But it's a phrasing, it's like those kind of, I mean, having read loads of them, this sort of, as you will have seen, it works very well to the reader, whereas social economic things matter, page 50 thing is very harsh and quite upsetting. But as you can see, one of the things we talked about, which was important in chapter 1, was C pages, and this is picked up in the story of X.
Okay.
And that, can't see why that would be a problem.
Okay.
Probably will be, but I mean, but from my personal point of view, I think it would work fine.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Mohammed.
It's all right, because if there is no more questions about case studies, we can move on to one of the remaining 2 items. There was a question, I think, by Anne about Likert scale, using Likert scale measurement in surveys.
Yes.
Right now, I think the question was how appropriate is it to use Likert scale or something like
I
that?
think my supervisor has said you need to be careful because there are some issues, and I just wondered if people were aware of what the issues were.
Okay. Now, does anyone know? Everyone knows what Likert scale is, right? Likert scale is a psychometric tool or used to measure your respondents' level of agreement or disagreement with whatever you're asking them, and it's usually from totally agree to totally disagree. So that is the Likert scale. It's a way of quantifying their answer into one of
Something like that.
spelling.
yeah,
1, 2, 3,
Likert,
4, 5.
Likert,
I think it depends on the question you want.
Likert,
Tests,
Likert.
tests that you
ERT.
use, and whether the Likert scale is applicable is it a continuous variable Likert scale?
Well,
I
no,
think
strictly
no.
it isn't.
I think no.
I think
It's
it's discontinuous.
it's discontinued. Yeah.
So it depends
Strongly
on the
agree,
statistical
strongly
test.
agree, disagree, neutral, things like that.
But you can have different lengths of.
You can have a five,
1 to
like
6 and
5-step or 7.
yes.
It's usually odd number, not
Yes,
even number.
but sometimes you can use an even number because you want to force people to either express a for or against, so
Mm.
that you're not allowing them to have that neutral position.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yes. There are so many. The trouble I think with Likert, I mean, one of many trouble is like, for number one, people try not to be very extreme. So if they are very strong about something, they would say they would take like 90% instead of going 100%. Also, you will have many people. If you give them the chance to be neutral, they will be neutral. And this is something I did when I was surveyed earlier. Try to stay neutral when I'm not sure. Forcing them is going to tilt, but again, it's not going to be 100% representative. That's the issue that I am aware of.
I would say, from the technical point of view, and I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I would say, firstly, have a good look at someone who's used it in their research, similar to yours, and even to the extent of borrowing or adapting their schedule, but doing it very openly. I mean, don't cheat, but have a look at someone who's used a scale and see how they've used it, and to ask yourself whether you can use the same one even if it's relevant, or but the actual, there are technical questions about Likert scales, about the number of scales you have, and I don't think that's a big. You can have 4 or 5, or you can have various numbers, but you can have them to force, agreement or disagreement. I think the only technical thing that one of the technical things I'm aware of is about whether don't know is the same as halfway, and that gets confused in some people's research. So there's 3 in the middle, which is whether you have a don't know on your categories, 1 to 5, and then don't know, or whether you assume, which you shouldn't, neither agree nor disagree is the same as don't know. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
On a technical sort of issue, I think, with all these things, it's about clarity of the question.
Yeah.
Single question that is clear, and you can do. They often talk about putting questions so that you don't go down a line, don't they? They tell you not to do, so you agree with everything if you're that kind of person, so to vary it a little bit. I think that's important, but I think I think the piloting of all these things is important, because I think one of the big problems with all quantitative data that you get in thesis is this problem of all the responses pointing the same way, so that you find quite boring, to be honest, data results, because your questions are asked the questions are sort of like, did you think the course was good? Did you think the teacher was good? Did you think this was good? And they go, yes. So you've got 80-90% going down one line. And what you really want, perhaps, is, not you necessarily, but it's more fun to have proper division, so that you can group types of respondents and say, here are optimists, here are pessimists, or here are I don't know, something on, and here are users and here are non-users. And to do that, you need to make sure your questions are going to force a range of responses rather than just get this 80-90% of people all agreeing one thing. And then, but I just think the questionnaire design is so much more important than the technical thing of Likert scales, because of the question about what is it you want this, what is it you want the survey to do. And I just think at any level, we all struggle in saying what we want the survey to do and how we're going to use the results. And I think one of the things I'd like to draw attention to a lot is the way people report these results. Far more important to me about whether there's 4 or 5 scales. It's this reporting of results which gets my goat, which is this sort of reporting which gives you a table of what people have said, and then the text below just repeats what's in the table. And so you get these chapters which say 35% of people said this, 25% of people said this, and you despair, because why have you given me the table if you're going to repeat all the data all over again? And for me, the most exciting thing about quantitative data, and I can get quite excited by it, I think it's good, is those people who can draw out what is in the data that is interesting and why it's interesting, and maybe speculate a little, so that it's part of the storytelling process, so that you've got some quantitative data and you say, this seems to be the case. Most people, I'm very happy to see that in the written text, as long as it's used consistently. Most people were thinking this, this and this. And going back to what I said in chapter 1, a possible reason for this is and this will be investigated once I've looked at the qualitative data. It's far more interesting than 33% of people said this and 33% said the other.
And that would happen in the results. So the results are not just descriptive. This is what I found. The analysis is there as well.
It's very, very difficult to. It's very, very difficult. I would say there's a certain type of person who can manage the whole of the findings, quantitative, qualitative, and merge them all together in this very holistic picture, drawing on bits of data, etc., to tell a story. And I think it's beyond most of us. Most of us have to do it in serial thing. Here's the quantitative, here's the qualitative, here's the discussion, which is fine. That's not a problem. But the drawback of that is that you're pushing all the time within the quantitative story to extend it, to speculate, to bring in other bits of information, and you can, and that's kind of, I think. But avoid this bit of 33% said this. The other technical thing that people do is they invent. So on your one, you've got 1 to 5.
Yeah.
The people invent categories. So they say strongly agree, disagree, and you think, well, it's only a small thing, but if they hadn't used them, you don't know that those are the exact categories. It's an interesting issue.
What I want to use it for is before and after. So, a baseline assessment, what are your attitudes before, and then after the intervention, what are your attitudes? So it's a comparison thing.
Yeah.
So I can then actually see if I can measure self-perception of changes.
Yeah, well, what can I say? It sounds...
well, I guess you suggested looking for other people who've used a similar thing. I don't know how I would go about doing that. How would I find somebody who might have done something like that in their research?
I don't particularly know, because I don't exactly know what you're doing.
Okay.
I don't know.
Is it teachers?
No, it's pupils.
Oh, okay.
Pupils' perceptions and attitudes.
Yeah.
The student is going to answer the questionnaire
Yeah.
in your case.
Yeah.
But see, but putting it like that, for me, the big question is about, it's not the technical one about the survey. It's just that thing about, well, what are you measuring? I mean, as you know, it's like, are you measuring whether, those kind of things, it's often about measuring whether they like you or whether they like their teacher or something like that, rather than what's in front of them about the effect of the intervention. I mean, I think most people reporting an intervention tend to say, yeah, that was good, because you like that, people do that all the time.
Right. Let's move to our final theme. A question from Michelle about writing styles. When our writing style changes when we're writing about different things. So, for example, when writing about literature review, we are more authoritative and more academic. When writing about our experiences, for example, collecting data, we are more personal, and the inner voice changes. So, first of all, is this a problem, a challenge, and how to deal with it? If it is a problem, we want the thesis to be as coherent as possible. And I like the term she said when she was talking about the question on Facebook page. She said, "I am worried about having a stylistic mismatch when writing my thesis." So, you guys, any thought about that? Writing in different styles. I thought it is not necessarily a problem. It is. It might be a challenge, but as long as you're aware of it, that's a good start. I think you should try and make each chapter as coherent as possible. So, a methodology chapter, I expect it to be more personal, but a literature review, I expect it to be very academic and authoritative. And I found some help online with people who co-author books, and you have two authors, and they try and match their styles, and sometimes giving your work to other people to read could be of help. So if no one has anything to add about that, I will direct the question to Mike.
I'll add something. I just think it's, I think you should go for some kind of consistency, and if things are standing out as different, to ask why that is.
Yeah.
And I think that this distinction between the literature review as something academic and the other bit as storytelling is not. I think you can tell the literature review as a story if that's your kind of persona.
I think the problem is not that I have one persona or another. I think the problem is when we are writing and then reading what we wrote, we discover that we were writing in different styles.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Styles? I found like there was a lot more use of personal pronoun in my methodology. So when I was talking about how I accessed participants, use of gatekeeper, it was a lot more personal type of writing.
Would you like me to read the question?
I could change it. I could make it more abstract, more kind of third person, but it felt silly doing that.
Yeah.
It felt like unrealistic
Fake.
and not a true reflection kind of what happened. You know, the thing about you are writing this, don't try and pretend that you're not writing this and talk about somebody else did this. You did it, you know?
But why would you do the literature review in a different way?
Yeah, this is it. It's interesting. Because
Yeah.
at the very beginning, it's very personal. Right
Yeah,
at the beginning,
it would
the
be.
introduction is, this is me. This is why I'm doing this work. And then I've got my literature review, which is very kind of describing my rationale why. And there's parts of it become very academic, less of the personal pronoun. And then I've got my results, which is very personal pronoun-y again.
As long as you're keeping the same style within the chapter, I would have thought it would be okay, as long as there's that coherency in the chapters, because it's just, like you said, it's unrealistic to try and paper the whole thesis with one style when each chapter has its own sort of nuances, hasn't it? Because you're thinking more at a different level. suppose. I don't know, maybe there isn't even an argument then in terms of not having personal pronouns in the literature review.
I was
My
just thinking.
supervisor's not bothered about personal pronouns. He says, I haven't got an issue with you using personal pronouns at all. He doesn't understand why people have an issue about this.
I was thinking about what you said. Literature review could be written in a storytelling manner.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting. I'm not.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not
but
necessarily suggesting.
yeah,
but
but
it
it
can
could
be.
Yeah, I don't know why. I wasn't thinking outside the box. I thought that, oh yeah, you have to do it like that. You have to say 1, 2, 3, like very cold, very systematic kind of writing. But it doesn't have to be. It could be more personal. It could be about your journey.
It
It's
could be
interesting.
I mean, people do that. I mean, they say, I was. First of all, what people do, some people do, which I think is a good thing, is to say how it was created. So that they say, I carried out this kind of search of these kind of things, and these were the themes that I developed. So it tells you, it creates a bit of a narrative around the literature, which is good, I think, because it shows that it's not an impersonal process and what have you. But I mean, I've seen people do things like say, this was a key text for me because it raised points X, Y, and Z, which were clearly going to be important for my research, and tapped into my sense of or it gave voice to my concerns. I mean, but obviously you can't overdo it because there's not enough space, and it will become too chatty but there are things you can do to make the literature review part of the story rather than to appear as a...
And that was an example?
I can't remember where, but I do remember it.
Yeah.
Is it possible to access people's PhD projects so that you can get a feel for how other people have abused a style systematically? I don't know how you go about doing that.
RAP, isn't it?
Yeah, you can access the work as RAP service, the library RAP. You can access it online.
But it depends on not all theses.
No, nowhere near all of them really.
British Library as well. You can access theses on that. They've got a website and you can have a search.
I've got one you might be interested in, the paper copy, Rosanna's Espinosa. Oh, it's on RAP, I think. Ramos or Espinosa. I think it's probably Ramos, R-A-M-O-S.
Have you got it? RAP, wrap.warwick.ac.uk. WRAP. It is, I think, stands for a Warwick Research Archive Portal.
I think all theses have to be. There's a health warning about other people's theses because they are so varied in terms of quality, I have to say, and in terms of you can't assume the one you've got is you might be accessing one which scraped through by the narrowest of margins, or you might be and you won't know that. So
you don't know what
they were on that scale. It's a shame they don't have the comments or this person had major.
Yeah.
I have a colleague.
This person was very, very lucky.
Yeah.
I have a colleague that has sent me a chapter and I've read it and I'm just like, how on earth can you write that? It's like he's found a voice that sounds so credible, and I think there are people that just can do it, and it's actually finding those people and then actually thinking, how did they get from the start of their research to a point where they've actually found that voice and can communicate it through their writing?
Well, I guess because they've written a lot and they write and write, I would say. But the other thing I would say about health warnings is that other people's work always maybe it's me, but other people's work always looks better in other fields. It always looks better than your own work. And it's obvious in a way because you know all your stuff, or you know a good deal about it. So when you read your own stuff, you think you're forever looking at it saying, oh, it's ridiculous, everybody knows that. And then you read somebody else's and you go, oh, they're so they are so brilliant. They've read 300 articles and books, and they've done all this. I'm never going to be as good as them. But when you get, I've been moving around fields of research recently, and it's very interesting because the stuff I've been reading, I just thought, oh, this is brilliant. And now I've read more of it, I think, oh, it's no better than anything else, And it's a fascinating thing to do. So some of it is the how good it looks if you don't really know it.
Can I say something, add something that relates to what you said about reading a piece of work that was really, really impressive? It sometimes gets frustrating when you're reading other people's thesis because it might get like that. But I can think of one example when I read a thesis, and it was absolutely amazing. I thought it was like definitely worth publishing. But I got frustrated with it because I thought there's no way I'm going to write like this. Not in 10 years. And I was right, because when I did some research, the person who wrote that thesis is not a fresh graduate. The thesis is related to about quality management in education, and he was a department head for 30 years, and then he did the PhD. So obviously he had experience, he had the authoritative voice, he had, and he's a British person, so he's very comfortable around with the language. So when I found out that, it was like a relief, because I know now I don't have to write like this. I mean, I never did have to write like this, but it was a relief, like, I see. It makes you realize that, and something that we know, but sometimes we need to remind ourselves, people come from different backgrounds and they have different experiences. So you have the fresh graduate, you have the professional, you have the experienced, the non-experienced, and so on. And you have people coming from one field to another. They're making interdisciplinary research, and they will add something new that you never thought about it. So something to keep in mind.
If you find any authors that you like their writing style, maybe keep a track, and then before you start writing, go back, read theirs, just as like a little mental warm-up, to kind of get you in the zone, and then write regularly as well. So my supervisor, she said writing's like a muscle, like you just have to practice and practice. And you get better.
And do you have to give your writing to your supervisor each time? Or do you just review it? Like, I mean, I know you are going to write, but then what do you do about that? Do you go back and read it, or do you send it to someone?
I wouldn't give everything that I write to it. Just the stuff that I feel like, okay, I need, and this is how I could make the best use of the time that she has to read anything I've written.
Right, but everything you write, you would go back and read it later on, or not necessarily.
I tend to I do tend to read it, but it depends on what it's for. So if I write in my research diary, I might just scan it. And then if I've written a draft of a chapter, then I will read it.
One of the things that I'm trying to do is on Friday write something. So whatever I've done that week, on Friday morning write something about it. I'm not very good at doing it, but that's my plan, because actually that exercises the muscle that you're actually focused, so you don't forget. Because this is something I often find, I'll read something and then think, 3 weeks ago I read something and I've forgotten. But if you've actually had a go at writing a summary of the things that you found out that week, systematically, regularly, it's like doing it. Yeah. Can I ask, Mick, you did this fantastic thing with the upgrade where you had examples of people's work. Is there any way you could do that for PhD thesis? Is there any way you could actually have some way of saying these, even if it's like 10, these are 10 research theses that you might be interested in looking at, as opposed to us just randomly taking a hit at anything.
You mean for good quality?
For good quality.
I could.
If all the supervisors just had one student, and that you could have maybe a list on the blog of people who we could refer to, because actually all that upgrade stuff is so helpful, because it just gives you a framework to.
Has anybody's supervisors recommended theses for them to read? Maybe we can ask them, could we have permission to tell the rest of the group about it or something like that?
I don't think there's I mean, if they're on RAP, they're on RAP, they're public, so you can just, there's no problem about that.
Yeah, but if they were recommended, then they are brilliant. They weren't lucky. I mean, at least they weren't lucky.
People have different research, so
Yes,
Especially in my topic, I haven't found something the same useful.
That's the curse and a blessing of doing something brand new, isn't it?
I have actually one thesis. I attended workshops that I told you about it.
Yeah.
And the person who presented the workshop, he recommended a thesis with a good structure.
Yeah.
He said really good structure. I haven't read it yet, but he said it's a good.
We could have a look,
if you
yes.
want to share it with you.
Please.
Yeah.
I will send it to everyone.
He said this is a good review.
Okay, thank you.
Structure and there is clarity in the whole
Yeah.
thesis.
Okay.
I attended a workshop about methodology and methods. Paradigm and positive.
That was recommended. Okay.
And he recommended this.
Good.
Yeah, we'll see what I can do.
Right. Now we come towards the end. There is one matter that we have to the SSLC. One matter which is the SSLC rep. SSLC stands for Student Staff Liaison Committee, and we need a course rep for our course. So I will leave the mic to say what you had to say about that.
Okay, well, has anybody done the SSLC?
Last year Esther done it.
Last year,
Yeah.
does she want to do it? Well,
Actually, I want to say something about this SSLC. Last year, Esther had done it, and I think this kind of experience should, if we share this kind of role, it would be better. Just to grasp by one people. But if someone has some other leadership experience, maybe the other one can have.
So have two people.
I thought sometimes they have more than one person.
I meant not a two person. Yeah, last year someone who started 2012 took the role. Yeah, Esther did it. So maybe this year, who started 2013, if someone who come from that year group, it would be better just to do it same year group.
Well, the first question is to find somebody who wants to do it. I think that's the key, because if we don't have somebody who can.
Yeah, actually, this time we have two people who nominated themselves.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah.
Well, why don't we just say we'll have two people? Or
are you interested in being? Anyone here is interested in being SSLC?
What do you have to do? What's the responsibility?
That's a very good question.
It's you have to attend a meeting every day, and you get paid £15,000 a month. And all the coffee you can drink.
You had me at all the coffee.
No, I don't really know. You have to attend these meetings, which is once a term, isn't it? Or twice a term, once a term. And they're not very exciting meetings, to be honest. So we do normally find it quite difficult to get people to volunteer. Because what tends to happen is people go to meetings and they raise, I think we call it praise or grumble about things that are happening in the department. So very often they'll say things like, why don't we, why aren't there coffee machines in so and so, or why do lecturers
I'm
turn?
always doing that kind of things.
Yeah.
However,
why do lecturers turn up drunk? Can we photocopy? Why don't we have photocopy?
We need
photocopiers doing that. sometimes more weighty issues often it's about when the exam, because there's masters lot are on it as well, and they're always occupied by exams, and they will say assignments, and why do assignments happen at the same time instead of staggered, or why did we have a session on this then instead of now? Library introductions, most of it very useful stuff. I would think but I would like very much somebody to represent PhD students on it, because I think you need a loud voice if we're moving to the main site. And I've seen in all the documents I've seen is there will be PhD rooms, but it's the kind of thing that SSLC should be the that is to me one of the major things that will happen is what kind of accommodation have we got? Is it factored in? And I'm afraid to knock on people's doors and say, excuse me, have you thought about this? Do you know what we want? I have to say, last time it was organised when we had the problem with the Avon and we moved over to the main site. I was absolutely staggered at how well it was organised. I'm very cynical, but it was. I just thought, why didn't they wait a year? It's like, oh, this is good. So I'm very hopeful that it'd be done well this time. But it's the kind of role for the SSLC. So it's all about raising problems and just making sure people know about them. It's not a very exciting task because people can't give you yes and no answers. For the master's students, it's deeply frustrating because they raise questions something's just about to be done about it, and then they've left because it's a year on, or they get promises of things. And then, of course, it gets lost over the year. But anyway, and I think is it once a term, is it, or something?
Not sure. So this person will be your representative if you have an issue, as like I said, they will fight for your issues, right? Now, from their point of view, or if you are thinking about becoming a representative, what you will gain, according to the website, is a lot of transferable skills and knowledge about how higher education works, and you will become more and more accustomed with bureaucracies, which is something that might be very helpful in future career. So I'm not sure if this person is both assigned or elected, and how
I think it should be elected. I think it is elected.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be elected. It's just often nobody wants to do it. So you have to, if you kind of, somebody like myself would go and say, oh, could you possibly do this for us?
I see.
So it's a kind of, but theoretically it should be somebody who's sort of elected, or at least not necessarily formally, but there's some kind of process.
Okay. Now there are two people who are not with us today who said that they are interested. Is there anyone who is here who is interested?
Actually, I was interested.
Okay.
And I made some. Actually, last year I went to Ian and I made some issues. After then, I felt, I'm rejected like this.
Yeah.
However, actually, I don't want to. I really wanted to give this opportunity
try
to
it out.
Next year person. If
so you're passing. You don't want to be a rep.
Would you be able to?
But
Okay.
can I just recommend someone?
I'm not taking names. It's actually I'm just going to pass the names.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So would you like to take notes of the names?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right, is that all right? Have they said that? So
Yes. And they said that.
Yeah.
So number one, we have Elaine Pang, I'm sure you know her.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, Asma
Why don't you?
Iqbal.
That's fine, yeah.
And now Arabi.
I think
And now?
people
Arabi.
already done many things.
Harvey.
Could you perhaps, I don't know how you want to do it. Shall I ask whether we can have more than one, firstly? And then you'll just have to argue it out between you.
Sorry, I missed who else wants to do the role?
Elaine,
Elaine?
Asma,
I don't know the name.
and Harvey
She's doing research in Malaysia.
can do. She's in Malaysia right now.
You should do a presentation.
Can
I'm
I-
joking.
can I-
Very, very good idea.
It's cruel.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Better 3 minutes.
So are we going to elect one or two?
I don't know whether we need one or two. I don't know if we can have two, or I hope if they work. Let me go and find out.
So we'd either have a committee of 2 or 3 people, or we would have to
Likely
elect.
You can have 3. But,
Right.
I'll find out for you. At least we got. I'll put those
3
names.
candidates.
I'll let Anne know, Anne Packwood know, and she can. I can withdraw, and you can deal with it direct.
If there is one more, if it is more than 2, I want to put myself.
Okay.
And
Yeah. Good.
can I recommend some?
Not really, but you.
Okay.
I don't know. You can do, but I mean.
I really wanted to put Hafiz as well because it is very easy to make him walk.
I'm workable.
Sorry.
I like the idea of Hafiz being, because from my experience, he's always online and is connected. Yeah, it's easy to get to him as opposed to other people. So that is one reason.
Make him walk. Hafiz, I need this.
Well, if he doesn't want, we can't force him. Right.
Can I just thank Michael for coming? It's
sorry.
really good of you to
Thank you
give
very
us
much for
time.
your time.
And can I thank Mohammed for keeping
Yeah,
us all
can
on
we-
track?
You're most
You've done a
welcome.
fantastic job, and it's really
Welcome.
appreciated.
Thank you.
I'm really happy to see you guys all here.
Of course.
Yeah, brilliant.